The Young and the Restless Spoilers. The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the empty executive suite at Glissade, turning the lights of Genoa City into smeared, weeping streaks of gold and red. Inside, the storm was far more volatile. "You think you can just erase me, Claire?" Audra Charles's voice was a serrated edge, cutting through the hum of the fix system. She advanced, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. "You think because you're a Newman now, you're untouchable. I know who you really are. I know what you did in Jordan's care. You're not a princess, you're a weapon." Claire Grace stood her ground near the heavy oak desk, though her knuckles were white as she gripped the edge. The air smelled of ozone and expensive perfume, Audra's signature scent, now cloying and suffocating. "I'm not that person anymore, Audra. But don't push me. You're losing your grip on Glissade, on Kyle, on everything. Don't make me the excuse for your failure." "My failure?" Audra laughed, a brittle, manic sound. She lunged, grabbing Claire's arm. "I built my life from nothing. You were handed a dynasty because you cried a few tears to Victoria." The physical contact snapped the tether of civility. Claire yanked her arm back, shoving Audra hard. Audra stumbled but recovered instantly, her eyes wide with a feral rage. She charged, and the two women collided in a tangle of limbs and fury. It wasn't a slap or a hair pull, it was a brawl born of months of whispered threats and public humiliations. They crashed into a side table, sending a heavy crystal decanter shattering to the floor. "You ruined everything," Audra screamed, pinning Claire against the wall. Claire fought back with a strength honed by survival, twisting her body and driving her shoulder into Audra's chest. Audra gasped, reeling back, but her hand closed around a heavy, bronze sculpture, a modernist piece with sharp, jagged edges. Blind with adrenaline, Audra swung. The heavy metal connected with the side of Claire's head with a sickening thud. Claire didn't scream. She simply crumpled, sliding down the wall like a marionette with cut strings. Her head hit the floor with a hollow tap, and she lay still, her hair fanning out over the spilled amber liquor and shards of crystal. Silence rushed back into the room, deafening in its suddenness. "Claire," Audra's chest heaved. The bronze sculpture slipped from her sweating palm, clattering onto the marble. "Claire, get up. Stop playing." She dropped to her knees, her hands shaking so violently she could barely touch the woman lying before her. She reached for a pulse at Claire's neck but felt only the thrumming of her own terrified heart in her fingertips. The blood was pooling fast, dark and viscous against the pale carpet. "No, no, no," Audra whispered, the reality of the moment crashing down on her like a tidal wave. I didn't mean." She scrambled backward, crab walking away from the body until her back hit the desk. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her throat. She was Audra Charles. She was a survivor. She couldn't go to prison. Not for this. Not for her. She looked at the security camera in the corner. The loop. She had disabled it earlier for a confidential meeting that never happened. Luck. Twisted, dark luck. Audra moved on autopilot, a fugue state of terror. She grabbed the heavy Persian rug from the center of the room and rolled Claire's motionless body into it, grunting with the effort. She dragged the bundle toward the service elevator, which opened into the underground parking garage, a blind spot in the building's security grid. Her mind was a fractured kaleidoscope of images: the trunk of her car, the construction site on the outskirts of town near the old jagged cliff, the rain washing away the sins. She drove like a phantom through the storm, the heavy bundle in her trunk weighing down the rear axle. At the cliff's edge, overlooking the churning waters of the athletic club's overflow drainage, a chaotic, muddy river tonight pushed the rug over. It tumbled into the darkness, swallowed by the roaring water and the night. Audra returned to the office, her hands raw from scrubbing the carpet with industrial cleaner found in the janitorial closet. It wasn't perfect. There was still a faint stain, a shadow on the floor. She rearranged the furniture to cover it. She left the building at 3:00 a.m., a ghost in her own life. Down in the muddy embankment, miles downstream where the drainage surged into the river, the rug snagged on a submerged root. Claire coughed, a wet, hacking sound that tore at her throat. The icy water had shocked her back to consciousness minutes after hitting the river, the rug unraveling in the violent current. Pain radiated from her temple in blinding spikes, but the cold was a clarifying force. She dragged herself up the muddy bank, shivering uncontrollably. Her hand went to her head, coming away sticky with blood. She was alive. But as she looked up at the distant lights of the highway, a realization crystallized in her concussed mind. If she went back, it would never end. Audra would spin it. The Newmans would suffocate her with protection. The press would tear her apart. The crazy girl from the lake house finally snapped. She reached into the waterproof lining of her boot. The emergency cash. It was a habit from her days with Jordan, always having out. A thin, vacuum-sealed packet containing a passport with a different name, a credit card linked to an untraceable offshore account, and a wad of cash. Claire Grace died in that office. She limped toward the service road, her silhouette merging with the shadows of the trees. She found a truck stop bathroom 3 miles down the road. Under the flickering fluorescent light, she stared at her reflection. One eye was swollen shut, her hair matted with blood and mud. She took a pair of scissors from her emergency kit and hacked off her long blonde hair, leaving it in jagged, uneven clumps in the trash. She washed the blood from her face, donned a nondescript oversized hoodie she bought from the truck stop rack, and pulled the hood low. By dawn, a Greyhound bus bound for Chicago was pulling out of the station. The woman in seat for B, listed on the manifest as Jane Doe, watched Genoa City disappear through the rain-streaked window. She felt a strange, hollow lightness. No more expectations. No more past. 3 days later, the silence in the Abbott mansion was heavy. "She's not answering call," Summer Newman said, pacing the living room, her phone pressed to her ear. "It goes straight to voicemail. It's been 72 hours. Claire doesn't just vanish." Kyle Abbott sat on the sofa, his head in his hands. "We had a fight before she left. About Audra. I thought maybe she just needed space. Went to the lake house." "I checked the lake house," Cole Howard said, entering the room, his face drawn and pale. "It's empty. No sign of her. Her car is still parked at the Glissade lot." That detail sent a chill through the room. "I'm calling the police," Victoria Newman announced, her voice trembling but authoritative. She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. "Something is wrong. I can feel it." Across town, in the penthouse suite of the athletic club, Audra Charles stared at the wall. The curtains were drawn, blocking out the midday sun. She hadn't slept in days. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. Every siren in the distance sounded like judgment. She picked up her phone, her fingers trembling. She had checked the news feeds 1,000 times. Nothing. Nobody found. No reports of a missing person until an hour ago, when a gossip blog posted a blind item about a missing Newman-heir. A knock at the door made her jump so violently she dropped the phone. "Audra, it's Nate," a voice called from the hallway. "Open up. We have a meeting with the investors." I'm sick, Nate," Audra called back, her voice cracking. "I can't come in." "You've been sick for 3 days." Nate's voice was muffled but firm. "And people are asking questions. The police are at Glissade, Audra. They're looking at security footage." Audra's blood turned to ice. The footage. She had disabled the suit's camera, but what about the lobby? The elevator? Had they seen her dragging the rug? "Go away, Nate," she shrieked, the hysteria bubbling up. Silence on the other side of the door. Then slow, retreating footsteps. Audra sank to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. She was trapped. A prisoner in her own luxury cage. She closed her eyes, and all she could see was Claire's lifeless face. 2 weeks later, a small, dingy apartment in a suburb of Chicago. The room was sparsely mattress on the floor, a laptop on a crate, and a wall covered in printed photographs. The woman with the short, dyed black hair sat cross-legged on the mattress, staring at the laptop screen. It was a live feed from a hidden camera, and she had paid a cleaning crew member $5,000 to install inside the ventilation grate of the Glissade executive suite. On the screen, Audra Charles was pacing. She looked gone, her usually immaculate hair pulled back in a messy bun. She was talking to herself, muttering, checking the locks on the doors. Claire took a bite of an apple, her eyes cold and hard. She picked up her phonea burner. She typed a message. Sender, unknown. Recipient, Audra Charles. Message, that rug was heavy, wasn't it? She hit send. On the screen, Audra froze. She looked at her phone, and then, slowly, she looked up, her eyes darting around the empty room as if she could feel the gaze upon her. She dropped the phone as if it were burning hot, and backed into the corner, hyperventilating. Claire didn't smile. This wasn't a game. It was a dismantling. Back in Genoa City, Chance Chancellor stood in the center of the glissade executive suite, his detective's badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. "What do we have?" he asked the forensics technician kneeling by the wall. "Luminol lit up like a Christmas tree, detective," the tech said, pointing to a large, irregular patch on the carpet that had been aggressively scrubbed but not erased. "Someone bled here. A lot." Chance narrowed his eyes. "And the rug is missing from the inventory photos taken last month. We also found this," the tech said, holding up a small, sealed bag. Inside was a tiny shard of crystal, kicked deep under the baseboard, and caught on the jagged edge was a single, long strand of blonde hair. Chance took the bag, his jaw setting. "Get a DNA match. Compare it to Claire Grace's hairbrush from the Newman Ranch." He walked to the window, looking out at the city. The pieces were coming together. The missing car, the scrubbed crime scene, Audra Charles's sudden erratic behavior. "Bring her in," Chance said into his radio. "Bring in Audra Charles for questioning." Audra was shaking when the pounding on her door began. "Genoa City Police. Open up." She scrambled to the bathroom, locking the door. Her breath came in short, jagged gasps. "They know. They know." Her phone buzzed again. "Message, they're coming for you. Don't worry, the river is cold, but you get used to it." Audra screamed, throwing the phone into the mirror, shattering the glass. From her apartment in Chicago, Claire watched the feed go dark as the police breached the suite. She closed the laptop slowly. This was just the beginning. Audra would go to prison, destroyed by her own guilt and the ghost she created. And Claire was free. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at a city where no one knew her name. She touched the scar on her temple, hidden beneath her dark bangs. "Rest in peace, Claire Grace," she whispered. She turned off the lights and walked out the door, disappearing into the anonymous crowd of the night. Audra never imagined that a single step into a dimly lit room could collapse the fragile structure of her carefully rebuilt life. Yet that was exactly what happened when she pushed open the door and found Claire lying motionless on the cold floor. At first, her mind refused to process what her eyes were seeing. She froze, clinging to the desperate hope that Claire was simply unconscious, that this was a misunderstanding, that the stillness in her limbs and the natural angle of her head did not signify something irreversible. But the longer Audra stared, the more the world around her began to tilt, as if gravity itself had shifted. Panic surged through her veins in a violent wave, leaving her breathless and trembling, unable to distinguish between rational thought and the choking fear that she had somehow caused this catastrophe, this potential death, this nightmare that threatened to devour everything she had fought so long to protect. Her heart slammed so hard against her ribs she thought it might burst. Her throat constricted, her vision blurred, and in that spiraling freefall, she could think of only one person to call: Holden Novak. It was an instinctive choice, not a logical one. Perhaps Audra believed he would understand the urgency, or perhaps she knew that Holden existed in the gray zones of morality where people didn't ask questions, they acted. When he answered, her words came out fractured, barely coherent, drenched in hysteria as she begged him to help her move Claire's body, erase any trace she had been there, hide everything before someone discovered what had happened. It was only after she ended the call that she realized what a dangerous request she had made. Asking Holden for help with something this dark was like walking into a tiger's cage and hoping it had eaten recently. Holden arrived faster than she expected, far faster, in fact, than seemed normal. And from the moment he stepped inside, something in the air shifted. He didn't gasp. He didn't freeze the way a normal person might. Instead, he surveyed the scene with a detached calculation that made Audra's stomach twist. His posture was relaxed, almost too relaxed, as if he had rehearsed this kind of scenario before. When he knelt beside Claire's body, the gesture was clinical, not compassionate. And when he turned back to Audra, the look in his eyes was not shock but opportunity, a fleeting glint of someone assessing angles, risks, and advantages. Still overwhelmed by panic, Audra didn't grasp it immediately. She simply clung to the hope that Holden would help her navigate the impossible. She watched as he wiped surfaces she hadn't touched, as he moved objects she didn't understand the purpose of moving, as he asked sharp questions not about Claire, but about where Audra had been, who might know she was here, and who might have reason to suspect her. Each question struck her as strange, but her mind was too clouded to fully absorb the implications. She followed him blindly, her hands trembling as she did what he told her, believing she had no choice but to trust the only person willing to help her in this impossible moment. But then the sirens came. They wailed in the distance, faint at first, then rapidly approaching, sending a bolt of terror through Audra's chest. Someone had called the police. That meant they were running out of time. Holden's jaw tightened in a subtle way she almost missed, and he muttered something under his breath that she couldn't make out. When the officers arrived, they swept through the area with methodical precision. What stunned Audra was how quickly they uncovered evidence she knew she hadn't touched, hadn't created, hadn't been near. A stray hair that matched Holden's profile. A fingerprint on a broken glass that she was certain he had never touched in her presence. A scrap of fabric snagged on a chair, fabric that looked suspiciously like the lining of Holden's jacket. Piece by piece, the officers collected clues that painted a chilling portrait of premeditation, a portrait in which Holden appeared as the orchestrator, not a bystander. And yet the more they found, the more Audra felt a cold realization creeping into her spine. None of this was accidental. Holden had been there too quickly. He had known where to stand, what to touch, what to move. He had answered her call not with panic, but with readiness. Now, as the police murmured among themselves, speculating that Holden might be involved, Audra saw him watching her not with fear, but with the faintest suggestion of satisfaction pulling at the corner of his mouth. It was then that dread transformed into suspicion. Had Holden used her panic as an opening to pull her into a trap? Had he anticipated her desperation? Was Claire's collapse part of something larger, something designed to entangle them both in a web where Holden held the strings? The questions swarmed like hornets in her mind, stinging her with every new memory of Holden's behavior. She tried to steady her breathing, but the room felt smaller, suffocating, as if the walls were closing in. Holden sensed her fear. He stepped close, lowering his voice in a tone meant to soothe, but every syllable was coated in something synthetic. He insisted they had to stay united. He insisted the police would twist anything they said. He insisted he was on her side. But his eyes betrayed him. There was something hungry in them, something that made Audra realize he wasn't comforting her, was containing her, controlling her, ensuring she didn't slip out of the narrative he was constructing. Her trust fractured cleanly in that moment. Before she could confront him or the police could complete their assessment, an unexpected sound rippled through the space, a soft groan, followed by the rustling of fabric. Audra's head snapped toward the source, breath suspended in her chest. Holden stiffened, his entire demeanor shifting in an instant, and the officers instinctively reached for their weapons. Claire moved. Slowly, deliberately, she pushed herself upright, brushing dust from her clothes with a composure that did not belong to someone freshly revived from unconsciousness. Her expression was cool, calculated, and far too steady for someone who had supposedly been lying near death only moments earlier. Every eye in the room widened, but Claire's gaze locked onto Audra and Holden with laser precision. Then she smiled. It was the kind of smile that could split the world open, the smile of someone who had orchestrated every beat of the chaos that had consumed the day. With chilling calm, she began to speak, unraveling the truth like a blade sliding into exposed flesh. She revealed that none of this had been accidental. Not her collapse. Not the timing of the police call. Not the evidence scattered with surgical precision. Everything had been crafted by her, piece by piece, to plunge Audra and Holden into mutual suspicion, legal danger, and emotional ruin. Her goal had never been survival, it had been revenge. A revenge so precise, so elegantly layered, that neither Audra's panic nor Holden's cunning had been enough to detect it. Claire had studied them, predicted them, manipulated them. She had allowed Audra to fall apart. She had baited Holden into playing the Harry the villain. She had constructed a trap where both would eventually turn on each other, undermining the fragile alliances they once believed would protect them. And now she stood before them, victorious, with both of them gasping under the weight of her revelation. In that moment, Audra felt as though the ground beneath her had vanished. Everything she feared, everything she trusted, everything she believed she understood about danger, manipulation, and betrayal had been redefined by Claire's chilling confession. Holden, for all his ambiguity and hidden motives, had not been the architect of the nightmare. They both had been pawns in Claire's masterful game. And as Claire walked past them, leaving chaos in her wake, one truth became terrifyingly clear. The war she had started was far from over. The first strike had landed. The destruction had begun. And neither Audra nor Holden had any idea what Claire intended to do next, only that she would not stop until both their lives were reduced to ruin.